Welcome, Giselle General, representing Ward Sipiwiniwak. Your first time City Council candidate, and it's a record hot day out. It's 8 a.m. in the morning. Welcome to the Keep Time Studio. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. This is exciting. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. I'm glad to have you here as well. As someone who doesn't drive, you must have bared the weather to get here. You rely on transit to walk and navigate our city. You're advocating for a reliable and ongoing expansion to our transit routes. The West LRT is especially important to Sipiwiniwak. If elected to City Council, how will you directly influence the public transit needs of our growing community?
The first thing is just by being a role model. I really don't think we have a city councilor who cannot drive. And I think by demonstrating my firsthand experiences with navigating the city, it helps put it in the front and center of conversations. To emphasize how public transit affects everyday people. I acknowledge that the percentage of people who use transit, there's not a lot of us, about 13% if I'm not mistaken. So sometimes when it comes to decision making, we are not as prioritized. However, with the city growing even further, the city plan had discussed about the importance of a better transportation network. So I'm going to do everything I can to continue bringing this up in policy decision conversations at committee and council meetings. I actually also volunteered for 3 years as a board member as a citizen board member of the Edmonton Transit Advisory Board. So if I end up being the city councilor liaison, I mean the one that we have right now, he's also a great advocate for transit. But I will also utilize these opportunities to hear from everyday citizens who are really passionate about public transit and what's the word I'm looking for? Being a champion, right? Just encouraging that it's not perfect, of course, but the best way to make a difference is to speak up and speak out to your personal experiences. And I will engage with constituents regularly to really hear on the ground what's going on and then pass it on to decision makers, both to council and administration.
Well, you believe in broad police review, and that's overdue, and advocate to ensure a proper overhaul of the process to ensure that Edmontonians truly feel safe and supported. And this is especially important to newcomers, BIPOC individuals, homeless, sexual assault survivors, and more to you. How do you suppose we instigate such broad change in our policing infrastructure?
And this, thank you. I think this is a very important component of my platform, and it's also why I prefer the terminology police reform because there is different potential activities that sometimes might involve diverting funds and sometimes might involve adding in more funding as needed. For example, perhaps there should be more training, sensitivity training, so that people of all backgrounds and circumstances actually feel safe contacting law enforcement for when they need help. At the same time, and it has been talked about many times, talk funding towards services that help people have stable, fulfilling lives so that they don't have to be victims of crime in the first place. For instance, like stable housing and mental health support. So, yes, that will involve diverting funding from the police. Last year, given all the increase in advocacy after the death of George Floyd, there was a task force that was launched, right? And the recommendations of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Task Force, I believe I have the name right, the best and the most immediate thing we can do is to follow the recommendations that were done diligently by these incredible members of the community.
If elected to City Council, what steps will you take that have not been initiated already to make the city more inclusive and accessible?
So there's two parts to this, and that is something I'm realizing is the potential and the impact of elected representatives. So one of them is, like I mentioned, being an example. One thing I have noticed with digital communications, and this was spotlighted even more due to COVID, that many people with accessibility needs, neurodivergent folks, have trouble accessing and understanding digital content. I've learned this was a humbling experience, quite frankly, where I work, when a colleague told me, he's blind, that only a small percentage of pictures have alt text on Twitter. So, when you scroll pictures and posts, only, you know, because many of them don't have alt text, the people who are visually impaired don't have a good understanding of what the image is. So, just making sure all my communications and behaviors are as inclusive as possible, I think that's the first step. Not all candidates, so this is a call to action to my fellow candidates. Make sure all your videos have captions. Make sure all your images have alt text. Make sure all your websites are easy to navigate for people with technology accessibility attachments or software, because I know that that is not the default, and it's something that we able-bodied people don't think about. So that is the first thing that I wanted to do. And the second thing is, when elected, also making sure that my activities are as inclusive as possible. We have an awesome advocate here in Edmonton. She's a deaf advocate and has really, again, a humbling experience for me. You mentioned so many times how not translation, sorry, captioning and having interpreters in events is actually really important. And she and I had politely called out certain city councilors when they're conducting online events. And you know what I heard? There's no budget allocated for interpreters and professional captioners. One councilor actually recommended that in the next election term, it's probably a good idea to have a pool, like a budget, so that whenever a councilor has an event, to have these professional interpreters being part of the budget already. And then finally, from a policy perspective, I think it's just finished not too long ago. The city has a document now called the Corporate Accessibility Plan. Again, going back to how city government works. They do research, they have a report. Don't shelve that report. All the details in this Corporate Accessibility Plan, I think it's pretty comprehensive. It just needs to be implemented properly, so that that lens of accessibility and inclusiveness when it comes to building infrastructure and doing conducting and implementing programs and policies and hiring practices of the city, that needs to be improved, and we just need to follow the research that's already been done.
According to the Filipino Canadian Political Association, there are 0 members of parliament in this country. You said that this is untapped potential in terms of different perspectives in leadership and representation. What are some needs you would like to see addressed specifically to the Filipino community that are often overlooked by elected officials?
There are some issues that it's not just specific to the Filipino community. It really extends to different demographics. For instance, like I mentioned, public transportation for newcomers and people with from in poverty and lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and people who cannot drive for other reasons like myself, getting around in a convenient way while you work your 2 to 3 jobs plus school and taking care of your family. That's a typical part of the survival mode phase of living in this country and in this city. So making sure that these structures are in place so that it's easier for people like me to uplift ourselves so that we have a more prosperous situation here. That is the first thing. The second one is safety. There's definitely safety concerns right now as far as people of color. And it's really unfortunate that even for me right now as a candidate, my safety concerns really influence my campaigning decisions. Like, I was told that it's not a good idea for women in general to door knock or mail drop alone. And now I am limited with my capacity with being physically outside and engaging with the community. So yes, like policing and safety concerns is definitely a very important component as well. And then the final thing, and this is a universal thing for many newcomers from different countries, is being able to practice their profession that they had before coming here. It is a common pattern in Canada. This actually started perhaps around the 80s or so, when people are very, very underemployed. You know, the doctors that become janitors and the teachers that become nannies, like that has been a thing. But that it doesn't used to be like that back in the 60s. So making sure that there are, and these are, it's interesting, these are more federal concerns more than municipal, but this is a lot of the common issues that the Filipino community has, and many newcomers have. Many people are struggling with all that certification and education that needs to be done in order to be the professionals that they used to be in the home country, and there's a lot of untapped potential over there.
I want to talk to you a bit about your journey to where you are now then. You can read your story in such anthologies as Gradual Rising of Women Project, 150 Stories of 150 Immigrant Women, and Paglalaliag, the Philippines Canadian Journey series. What advice can you give to BIPOC individuals, especially women who want to strive towards positions of leadership?
The first thing that I'd like to share is that you deserve healing from the different hardships and trauma that you experienced. It's a reality that many of us came from a place of great suffering, and it's really important, regardless of what you want to pursue further in life, to give yourself the opportunity to heal from these. Like in my case, there's quite a few. Being an immigrant's not easy. Being an orphan is horrific, and being a sexual assault survivor is a tragedy. And what was really helpful is that I didn't quite plan it completely that way, but before I went through this entire journey of building my life and my career before running for public office, I went to therapy in 2017, and it's the best thing that I've done for myself, because we don't realize how much coping mechanisms and unhealthy habits we internalize upon ourselves because of the traumas that we've faced in the past. Going through therapy has helped me be more accepting of myself, have a good mental health toolkit with dealing with failure, and help me overcome a particular level of perfectionism that is imposed upon immigrants and women. So that's the first thing I'd like to pass on. Like, take care of yourself. You are worthy of healing and supports, and how beautiful your life is not conditional to how incredibly successful you are. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that particularly as newcomers or even first gen, second gen Canadians, there is a learning curve when it comes to the Canadian political etiquette, and that's okay. Take your time to learn it with openness and curiosity. For myself, I had to learn how to be comfortable putting brochures in people's mailboxes. I don't know whether people are gonna be angry when I walk through their garage. And when there is a sign in the mailbox that says "No flyers, please," what is the political etiquette there? I needed to learn it. So these little details here that you don't know about, it's okay to be a little bit frustrated, because you don't know what you don't know. But seek out the advice of other people, particularly very politically engaged Canadians, so that you have that in mind when you make your campaigning plans. And then the third one is find ways to be proud of your heritage and who you are in a way that is comfortable for you. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So for myself, if you look at my campaign logo, that is very deliberate. That is the colors and the design of my campaign logo is my proud homage to the Filipino community and for my Filipino heritage. I believe there's also a candidate in Red Deer who really incorporated her heritage into her marketing materials, and I thought that's pretty okay. Feel free to respect what your gut feeling tells you about how much you want to portray yourself in your campaign communications. And finally, take care of yourself and the people around you. Like I mentioned earlier, people have been asking me why I have not been as physically in public when it comes to certain campaigning activities. But at the end of the day, I want to come home safe and alive. And that's why I made those deliberate choice to not yet go canvassing and not attend those protests and different large scale activities, because it's also it is a balancing act, and it's completely okay. The decisions that you make, factoring in who you are and your circumstances, I'm sure you're making them for a good reason, and they're completely legitimate.
Well, thank you, Giselle General. You're representing Ward Sipiwiniwak. Is there any last things you'd like to say to your constituency or to our audience?
So to anyone who lives in Edmonton, and particularly in Ward Sipiwiniwak, which is the former Ward 5 plus 6 Ward 1 neighborhoods, my name is Giselle General, and I'm running for City Council to fight for everyday Edmontonians like you and me. I think it's time for us to have more the perspective of servant leadership, and have elected representatives that considers the welfare of the average person when it comes to programs, policies, and decisions that our government makes. Please go to my website, gisellegeneral.ca, to get more information and to support the campaign.
Awesome. Thank you very much.